This meeting is being recorded.
That's new.
Yes, it is. I love it when Zoom does updates. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Well, if there was any doubt, we now know.
Now we know. Everybody's aware that this is being recorded. So welcome. And while we are waiting for our guests to jump on to our program this evening, we will just say hello and ask that you use the chat feature to say hello. We would love to know who is watching and where you're from. And I would like to begin with by acknowledging that the Millicent Rogers, we are located here on ancestral lands of the Tiwa speaking people, known today as the Red Willow people of Taos Pueblo. We strive to deepen our relationship with the Red Willow people through collaboration, while acknowledging and honoring the complex history of the Red Willow people, past, present, and future generations. We express gratitude to this land and to the Taos Pueblo elders and ancestors who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. So welcome, and we're just gonna kind of give a few more minutes. We had a large audience tonight, so we'll give people time to jump on to the meetings before we get going fully. And I'd like to welcome our guests this month. We turn towards the palette, gaining a glimpse of our artistic community through conversations with three painters, Glory Pennington, Max Jones, and Jim McDonald. Part of the nature of an artist community is that stories are shared through the canvas. They intersect, overlap, push barriers, and form a common bond between people of all walks of life. Thank you for joining us for this unique discussion between painters, where serendipity and vision bring forth abstractions, engendering new reflections of people, place, and sojourn. And I decided to use that word sojourn because that's how I think of viewing art in many ways. So you pause in front of a painting, that's a little mini sojourn in your day where you reflect and connect. And so that being said, I will shift over to Sarah and let's get the conversation started.
Well, hi, everybody. This is absolutely fabulous. We have a huge audience tonight. Thank you so much for everybody for coming. And so remembering I'm not a painter, I'm a pixel manipulator and a book publisher. So I am starting off saying we stipulate that life is saved through art. And I happen to know personally that art has saved all three of our panelists, and probably Karen too, and definitely me over the years. Okay, so now I put it out to you. Tell us about how that art came into your life and how it's just created you. So Max, why don't you lead off? You're so good at this.
This is how it all started for me. A little over 20 years ago, we opened our first gallery in Dallas, Texas, and we were selling other people's art. I had a painting in the back room that I was working on, an abstract piece, and the publisher of D Home magazine, which is a Dallas design magazine, happened to be in our back area, and she said, "What is that?" And I said, "Don't get that. That's it's something that I'm working on." And she said, "Actually, I love that. I want you to paint a piece for my dining room, but there's a stipulation." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "I want you to do a piece for my dining room, and then I want you to do a second piece, and I want you to put it out in the gallery for sale." And that, so I did. I painted a painting for her. She still to this day has that painting. And I did another painting and then hung it up and sold that first weekend. And the rest, as they say, is history. And here we are 20 years later.
That's pretty great. That just the acquaintance, the serendipity of it. Glory, how did you get into this? You and Jim, I know, are a little bit entwined in your history.
Very much. It's all his fault.
No.
I was fortunate to grow up in Kansas City in the sense of having access to the Nelson Gallery. And Saturdays, I'd take the bus down to the plaza, spend the day in the art museum. Working in art museums was, well, probably 25 years of my adult life and working. And all that time was really prep work. And I didn't know it, of course, but to just be able to absorb and observe how the brush strokes and, never dreamed I'd pick up a brush. I did get into photography in the mid 80s, which requires sharp focus, sharp vision. And that collapsed when I was in a train derailment 7 years ago, just past the 7-year anniversary. And my vision was suddenly shot. I mean, it was just all over the place. I couldn't focus. My left brain was gone, because that's the side I fell on. So it was like, well, what am I going to do? And then it was pick up some brushes. And not long after, Jim and I had the good fortune of meeting like two magnets through the Taos Artists Association in preparation for the studio tour. And I began painting with Jim. And I know, Jim, you remember the look on my face the first time I saw something I did and I went, oh my God, I did that. And it has not stopped. It has thrived. And COVID was a gift time-wise, in the sense of just cloister, put the 10,000 hours in, and I hope I'm doing this the rest of my life. That's how passionate I am. Jim, also how I feel about oils in particular. They are yummy and luscious, and just get me a spoon, So I've just been graced. It's really how I feel. The journey is ever evolving, and who knows where it will go, but I'm following my heart.
Who knew that art was delicious?
It is tasty.
Obviously. And I must say that when you introduced me originally to Jim, I did feel that taste, that there was a thickness of the paint on, and yeah, it's sort of like chocolate. You just can't get enough.
Chocolate frosting.
It's your turn to take it away.
Well, normally what I do when I'm teaching, for the first day with a new person or a new group, I do an elevator talk about how I got to where I am. I was born in 1942, and that was in the Great Depression and World War II. Our primary objective at that point in time was to stay alive. And we got through that. I was able to start school a year early, and then I skipped a grade. Education was different back then. It was based on ability. So I was able to start the University of Texas when I was 16 years old. And my parents, it was not tough love, because we didn't know that concept at that time, but they demanded or assumed that I would be capable of taking care of myself. So they drove me to UT campus there in Austin, dropped me off on Guadalupe across from the University Co-op. My dad said, stay in touch, and they drove off. I looked across the street and I saw the University Co-op, and 2 doors north of that was the Longhorn Pool Hall. And I'm standing there, I've got $25 in my pocket, which was a small fortune. And I asked myself, I looked across the pool hall and I said, what would Jesus do? In about 3 minutes, Jesus and I were in the pool hall, learning how to shoot pool. Fast forward a few weeks, I was mucking about in the university tower, which used to be the library there at UT. And I just happened into a section titled Art. And I thought, well, I've heard about that. So I started looking down this just my tens of thousands of books. And I would open a book and it was like being slapped with a wet fish. I mean, it was the most eye-opening experience. And I made a pledge to myself at that time, I will be an artist, because I was so impacted by what I saw. So fast forward some more, I had occasion to meet and visit with a then well-renowned oil painter from Spain. He was living in San Antonio at the time, Jose Mineral, Jose Atzara, Jose Vivas Atzara, and he painted immaculate. You talk about delicious. He painted with a palette knife, bold, large canvases, mainly Mexican village scenes and Spain scenes. And I incorporated that. So I have Jose Atzara to thank for getting me into painting. So I started painting in 1968, and that's before most people were born. But I don't know if it was good or bad, but soon thereafter, I received a commission from the Astor World Hotel to paint 68 paintings. And they wanted them in 18 months. And I, at that time, was married, had 2 children, had a full-time job. So I set up 3 easels in my studio, and I would paint 3 skies, 3 tree lines, 3 village scenes to get them ready in time and to deliver to the Astor World Hotel, because I was traveling a lot. And I made a pledge to myself at that time, in addition to being an artist, I said, I will never paint for money, because I did not feel like that was a route I wanted to take. One of the things that I really gained from Atzara was his absolute deep, abiding love for everything. He would look at a bush and paint it with such dynamic energy and color, and I carried that with me. And so for the last what, 53 years I've painted, and I don't do it for the money. Many years ago I started teaching, and I'm really in love with teaching, because I'm at an age where I have to throttle back. I'm in the bell lap. And what I want to do is see if I can share with others the gift that I had in knowing what painting was and learning that language. And it is a language. So to me, painting is borders on the sacred. When I teach, I don't focus on the mechanics of it unless the student is brand new. It does not take a lot of time to figure out to put tab A in slot B. That's easily done. So my focus when I paint and when I teach is to do the hardware items, the hand and the head, but the most important nucleus, the hub of my painting, is the heart. So I paint. It's a very emotional experience for me when I paint. I'm doing it for the love of the painting. And to paraphrase Joe Paquette up in Minnesota, who's an awfully good painter, Joe Paquette says he would rather celebrate the commonplace than exploit the obvious. So most of my work has to do with landscape. I'm enthralled with the Southwest. I've been going to Taos, my God, since the early 60s. And I lived there, and then I had a problem with my lungs. I had to get to a lower altitude. So I'm currently in Texas, but I left my heart in Taos. And I go back and visit it as often as I can. So
the hard thing is where we're wanting to go now. And just a tiny bit of backstory for me is exactly what, Jim, you said. My parents dumped me as a master's student in Germany, And I had no clue that in actual fact, I wanted to be an artist, and I found it there because that's how
Mhm.
the heart came out, and I was able to talk to people and start to learn what they were doing. So I taught myself
Mhm.
photographic work, and I had to start pretty much as what's in front of you, so realistic. And it's been a long journey for me to move into taking what is actually in front of me and my camera and turn it into something abstract, to take essences out. And of course, that's where we're going today, is we're wanting to say, okay, what did you take from people? What did you take from the land, the light, and how did you turn it into an abstraction? And maybe Max, you're probably the most abstract in many cases. Of course, you do a lot of different things. So talk to us about where that inspiration came that moved you into the abstract and how you define it too.
Well, I started out as an abstract painter before going other directions as well. But for me, originally, because we also had a design firm at the time, it was about the aesthetic. So for me, it was about creating, combinations of colors that would kind of invoke maybe an emotional reaction from the viewer. And for me, it was all about the aesthetic. Eventually, what happens when you do this for years and years and years is you start to pull inspiration from a variety of sources. So for me, the first time I came to northern New Mexico, I immediately fell in love with the color and the light and the earth and the sand. And there's something here that, of course, every artist talks about, I don't know if it's the infraction of the light or what it is, but the colors here feel more vibrant, and there's something just magical and spiritual about being in this environment. So the first time I came to Taos, I noticed that my color palette started to evolve and to change. And it was an interesting kind of evolution to watch that. So later, when we first came the first time, this was like back in 2011, something like that, we started coming to Taos every 6 months. And originally, we would just come and have vacation and go home, and I would paint back in the Dallas studio. But then something clicked, and I said, I need to paint while I'm actually there. So I started ordering supplies, and I would have them delivered to the Airbnb here in Taos, and I started painting here. There was something truly magical about being here to create these pieces. And I always tell people when I'm discussing like the evolution of abstract, about finding your lane. I think for me, early on, we're all experimenting, and I kind of wish I could go back and kind of get rid of those early pieces, but they're part of me. I think when I really found myself was when I came here to Taos and really kind of found my lane. And I don't know if people have seen my work, but I kind of paint these blended ethereal pieces. A lot of them look almost like abstract landscapes or sunsets. Some of them look kind of earth-based, but it's all about the color and the aesthetic for me. I always say that I want my work to be kind of like jazz music. It's not something that jumps out at you in this really kind of energetic way. I'm always coming to my work in kind of a tranquil vibe. Mm-hmm. And so it's jazz music, like background, it doesn't dominate a space. It just kind of lives in a space. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of the evolution of how when I first started versus getting to where I am now.
Now that's very interesting. Of course, I look at some of your things and I think color field painting because it just pops to me. And your interpretation of it, the blending of the colors is masterful. and I'm sorry to kind of stoke your ego there, but I do love those terrifically because you get lost in them. You think they're flat and they are not flat.
Well, you say that about the blending. I have other artists, and because I paint in acrylic and I dilute with a lot of water. So I'm painting in basically color washes in lots of layers. But to get that kind of ethereal transition from one color to the next, I have to do a lot of blending. So I was in my studio the other day and I noticed I use these really kind of cheap throwaway brushes on most of the abstract work. And because I totally destroy the brushes, I blend so hard, aggressive on the canvas that my brushes end up just these little nubs. And so I
can just envision you doing it. That's you scrubbing away at it as though you were out there doing the laundry on a rock in the river. I love it.
Yeah.
Moving from that way of physical working, Glory, you started out more as a photographer, as I did, and then moved into, I would say, an emphasis on painting. Is that indeed still true?
Oh, it absolutely is. And it's interesting, Sarah, to me that you see in your photography, you can get an abstraction out of it. The few times I was so delighted and surprised. But I really came more from getting down to the detail of commonplace that looks abstract. You might not know what you're looking at. For example, a classic car, you know, the grille, the lines, the curves, the art on wheel there. You might not even know that's from a car. So that's as abstract as I got with photography. And I honestly, confession, never really liked, quote, abstract art all my artistic life, all my museum years, until I came to the Harwood and they had a Diebenkorn exhibit up. And I'm like, I kind of glanced at it. I'm like, oh God, abstract art. Okay, well, we'll suffer through that, but 3 weeks later, I got it. It was like, oh my God. Oh, that's how I want to express what I see. And so you, Max, Jim, you all are able to look at a landscape and extract and distill down the important pieces. And this is what I'm really searching for right now and really exercising. I want to move that direction. So I would be going, 180 degrees from the realism of photography to the painting, the abstraction of painting. But I love it because it speaks so much more directly to your heart and your soul than the realistic details that we see every day and we might ignore. So I have to ask all three of you at some point in the course of this, please tell me how you look at a tree or a landscape and you go, yep, that line, that color. And Max, the fact that yours are not flat, I think is miraculous, because that's one of the things you tend to lose with abstraction is the sense of depth perception. And but yet there is depth in yours. And I think maybe the color washes, you've got that translucency coming through and you find yourself falling into them. So I would love to hear anything anybody would like to share on that line.
Well, I think Jim is probably really well suited to speak to that question, because I see a transition. I can visualize where one of his pictures came from in nature, even though it's not. And did you start out when you had that huge commission? Was that more realistic work, Jim, or?
It was pretty much the same as I'm painting today. And I think what makes my work what it is I don't use a drawing or a photo, or I don't copy anything. I start with a blank canvas and I pull up a memory or a vision of something that I've seen at some point that really caught my eye, caught my attention, and I really related to. So I'll pull that vision up, and my style is self-generating because I can only hold that vision for a relatively short period of time. Also, I can only focus on the wow factor. What about that scene caught my eye? And typically in my work, that will be the most realistic. But as you move out on the canvas from that, it becomes more and more abstract. And that's where I'm writing that picket fence, if you will, between abstract and reality. And I love working in that blurred area. But I think the key to what I'm doing for me is, well, first off, I never have appreciated rules too much. I'm not a lawbreaker, but I never have put a lot of faith in rules because they are so limiting. To the point when I start to do a painting, I'm very, very judicious as to that first mark I make on the canvas, because I know that everything affects everything. And as soon as I put that first mark on, I have started to limit my options. And it's like a funnel. You start very wide at the top, and as you move forward, it will constrict itself down. One of the things that I always try to encourage when I'm working with somebody, with teaching somebody, rule one is I want them to be able to explain to me verbally out loud why they're getting ready to paint what they're painting. If they don't have their mind and their heart set so that they can say it out loud, I'm painting this because, and it can be any reason. It could be I'm painting this because I want to practice making green, or I want to practice painting a tree, or I want to do whatever it is. But you know the old saying, not all who wander are lost, but many are. So, and it's pretty easy to get lost in a painting. And one of the biggest constraints I see with struggling artists is they struggle, and they end up like a dog chasing their tail. They go into ever tighter circles, and the first thing you know, everything is brown. One of the things I really stress is do not spend a lot of time looking at the painting. I will put a piece of paint on and then turn my back and walk away. Look out the window, and then I'll look back at the painting, and the painting will tell me what to do next. I mean, it literally, it's a dialogue.
Mhm.
That,
Well,
that is so delicious.
this is the heart that you're talking about,
Exactly.
is it not?
Exactly.
And you know, Max, we ask you about this extraordinary blending that you do, but what is it that tells you where to blend? Is it the same thing that the painting tells you what to do?
Yes. I agree with so much of what Jim just talked about as far as no rules and as far as limiting once you get rolling. So to answer that, I work intuitively. I don't have a preconceived notion of what my abstract piece represents, or if it represents anything at all. For me, it's about evoking an emotion or an emotional connection for the viewer. That's why a lot of people ask me when they're looking at a painting, they want to know, what is the inspiration for this painting? My answer to that is I really don't want to answer that question, because I don't want to dictate what response the viewer has. I want them to look at one of my paintings and have their own response.
Mhm.
It's kind of like Agnes Martin said at one point, that with abstract paintings, people want to know information or the inspiration behind it, and that's become commonplace to kind of wonder what is this about. But when you listen to a beautiful piece of classical music or jazz or whatever, it's understood that you are supposed to have your own response to it without understanding the background or the inspiration of whoever wrote that piece of music. So the way that I work is kind of like what Jim described. I will do a mark and then I totally let the painting just evolve and happen. And as far as the depth and all of that, that just has to do, I literally will just do kind of a random mark to start and then just start adding to it. And it's kind of like what Jim said, that funnel idea. As you keep going, your options start getting less and less as you get closer to completion.
Mhm.
And at some point, I think one of the hardest things when you work purely abstractly like I do, it never really looks like any, 10 people will see different things in my work. It's never like specifically, oh, that's a horizon line, or that's a fence, or that's a barn, or that's a tree. Everybody sees something totally different in my work. And so I just kind of let it evolve. And Jim also talked about how you get totally lost in a painting. The way I describe it, it's kind of like when you get home from work and you pull into your driveway and you're like, how did I get here? It's this totally like, I mean, sometimes 5 hours will go by and it's almost like a time warp. Like it's totally gone, but in front of me is a completed painting. It's almost like a meditation, like you're totally just immersed in what you're doing. And it's taken me a really long time to get to the point where you let the emotion drive you forward, as opposed, it's like, see, again, I'm agreeing with Jim. You don't get into your, I always say, empty your mind and kind of let it do its own thing, and don't look at it too much. Don't analyze it too much or think too much. Just kind of let it evolve. And I think that for me has been the most effective way to work.
Karen, why don't you tell us a little bit, in your experience at the museum, visitors, do they go for abstract things that you have either in the contemporary or the collection? Or do they not understand? Do they all want to know, gee, what is it?
Now, first I'll kind of quantify my own self and say I am not an expert in art history but I do paint. And so I'm familiar with all the processes, and I'm really enjoying listening to this conversation. But that being said, I think that at the museum, people have encounters with the arts, but it's through a cultural lens. And that's part of why I wanted to bring this, like kind of refine this topic as the title, talking about artist communities, because what Max is describing as, 5 hours later, the painting is there and I don't know what happened, I don't know. So there's so much vulnerability in being an artist and going into those places. And then that's a gift that you're sharing with the world. And so I think there's something very unique about artist communities and the nurturing that happens, which also plays into that tourist vibe when people come and it's like, oh, this space is just amazing. I can feel it. I think we all contribute to that as well. So that being said, I did look a little bit today because there's a painting in the museum that I mentioned earlier that always just catches my attention every time I walk past it. And it is an abstract painting, and I'm going to put it on my my background right now. At least it's a detail of this painting, and it was done in the 30s and 40s, 30s to 40. And so this is a detail, and the artist is, the name is Joe Hilario Herrera. And he was a Santa Fe Indian School painting student, and one of his mentors and teachers encouraged him to dabble in and touch a little bit on Cubist techniques. And so he did that. And then he just really embraced abstractions as an indigenous painter in the 30s. So he was quite transformative in his work and in that style, in having an impact on other indigenous artists, shifting from that Santa Fe Indian School style. I think that's hugely impactful. And what's interesting is, I don't think that most people visiting Taos think of abstract painters. They think landscape. And Max and I have talked in the past about this a little bit, how, you know, that's something that does need to be highlighted. Like, hey, there are many genres of painting that happen in our community and they overlap.
That's the beauty of the area, that somehow is engendered over, well, decades, century, more than, is that there are so many genres and they are all somehow fostered by this locale. We don't know, it's magic. And I wanted to explore what you were saying, Karen, with Glory, in the vulnerability, you with having been a survivor of a catastrophic train wreck, you are physically terrifically vulnerable. And did this extraordinary experience bring anything to your art? Did it change the way you thought?
Oh, absolutely. I think as much as anything, it's like, I've got nothing to lose because I'm still upright and I could have exited the planet at that point very easily. So it's like, I was hit up the side of the head. I'm stubborn. Okay, we all know that. But I was really literally hit up the side of the head because I was spinning over here, you know, and being a cog in a very worthwhile wheel. But it was like, no, there's more you need to be doing and you're going to do it. So after, you know, 3 years basically of healing, you're asking yourself those questions and working very hard to get well again and to be able to see again. And it's like, I've got nothing to lose here. You know, my ego's not a 40-year-old ego or a 20-year-old or whatever. It's like, I'm just grateful to be here and to share the beauty of this world that I see and feel and marvel when, you know, Max, you said something about the dialogue. Well, Jim, both of you said about the dialogue with the painting. I've so many times started to paint one thing and it totally ended up a total different painting. And I'm really great with that. And what I really love is when viewers look at it and they go, oh, look at that Kachina in there. And I'm like, really? There's a Kachina in there? You know? And they're getting their own juice out of something that you've really just been a vessel, is really how I see it. You're just passing on your observations, your perceptions. And I think one of the most important things we do is bring more beauty and more love into the world. Paint the good story. You know, that's the biggest purpose I see. And if they can't afford an original or they have too many paintings on the wall already, well, there's a lot of other ways you can, and Max, you're demonstrating it. You can wear that art. We've got wearable art for you, you know.
Well, Glory, you have perfectly segued into my next thought that I wanted to talk about for everyone, is that how you are being of service. Your art and you as the artist are being of service to the community, not just this elitist, if you will, individual paintings, but tell us about all these other things that you have envisioned to adapt your art into wearable or usable items. And your website is just a marvel of all these different things. So tell us a little bit about that. Remembering we don't have an awful lot
I
of
see
time
that.
left, and I want to hear what Jim's doing about teaching too.
Yes, okay. Well, there is the wearable art, there's the home decor, there's things that you can gift people like journals and note cards, and Millicent Rogers has a line of my note cards, thank you very much. And but one of the things, making art affordable, and Jim, to your point, I totally get about not painting for money. However, when it comes to buying the canvas and paints, I'm always very happy to accept money. So, you know, but it's a different mindset. It's not like, you know, you're going out there and you can't wait to make the bucks. It's not that at all. But there is something that's just that I'm beginning to work with that marries the photography and painting, and I'll try to hold one up here. This is about as abstract as my photography ever got. This is anyway, I'm trying to get it level somewhat and without glare, but it's just, you know, Vegas and Adobe. But what I've done with it, this is a painting on canvas, and then I've gone, excuse me, it's a photograph on canvas, one of my photographs, but now I've gone back in and so-called remarked with blue shadows underneath the vigas, snow on top of these structures, snow on top of here, a bluish. So you're emphasizing, you know, some reds up here, some blues there that weren't in the photograph itself. But to be able to offer something like this for me is very exciting, to marry those two lines of art. And this isn't as pricey as a whole original painting, nor is it as, you know, very affordable just as a canvas remake. But it's somewhere in between, and there's one of one, you know, there's not going to be another one like that. So you've painted on your own work, and it's so fun. That's the other thing. If it isn't fun, I'm not going to do it. So that's just something I'm finding new joy in.
And we found new joy in just looking at that luscious website.
Thank you so much.
It's delicious. And Max, you have to stand up a little bit and show your shirt, because this is something that I think is a terrific what
there you go, right there.
a delight to the to the populace. I mean, we see a little Modigliani in that, we see all kinds of things, and they're all caricatures without being cartoons.
Right.
And how did that come about?
Okay, so this is a pretty interesting story. So for the first, 18 plus years of my career, I was all abstract all the time. And then COVID hit, and we were in lockdown, and Peggy McGivern, who is one of the artists that we show in our gallery, it was weird, you know, it was like a ghost town. There were no tourists, there were no people, which we're so accustomed. And I called Peggy and I said, this is totally depressing. Get over here to my studio and paint with me and make me happy. So she came over, and because we paint together a lot, and we started painting, and I said, you know what, let's just do something we have never done before. And I said, you know, I've had this like image in my head of a very primitive looking red cow. I know that sounds totally crazy, but welcome to my world. And I said, I'm going to paint a red cow. So I painted a red cow, and I thought it was hideous. I was like, totally going to put it in the bathroom of my studio and never show another human ever. totally fine with that concept. And Peggy said, you know, that kind of primitive style is actually really popular. She said, just for fun, that's why it's called my Just for Fun series now. She said, put it on Facebook and Instagram and just see what your followers think who have only ever seen abstract. So I posted it online. It sold literally in like 1 minute. And I was like, what is going on? So at that point, I started painting all these little animals. And then the little animals kind of segued into little people because I missed people. So I started painting these little wacky characters and surrounded myself with these imaginary people out of my head. And what I figured out is if I paint something to make me happy or to fill a void for me without thinking about the money or sales or business or this is how I make a living, just totally do it for yourself, the sales will come. And so what happened is I started painting these little images and characters, totally focusing on color. Like, I mean, that's how my abstract brain works anyway. So there's no sense of reality with the little animals or the people. Some of them are green or pink or yellow or what, I mean, it's all about the aesthetic for me still. But what I found out is if I do it for me to make me happy, it makes other people happy. And so this series has totally exploded. And I've sold like 400 of these little wacky characters in 2 years. And so now I'm trying to paint one every day and I kind of put them out into the world. So, and like what Glory said, I'm trying to keep these really affordable. I'm a big advocate of getting new collectors to buy original work. And so I've always been an advocate of explaining to people that you don't have to be rich to be a collector of one-of-a-kind original work. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, that's how it all started. And so, and now it's one of my best-selling series ever.
That's the true definition of a souvenir. I think you just made it. And you know, you talk about making you happy. Jim, what you do, my opinion, is that you make people happy as you lead them into art of their own. And I think this is a service above and beyond to community at large, everybody.
I like your use there of the word community, because I'm a firm believer in the community of man. That's woman and man. But I think I got this from my father. My father was never more pleased than when someone asked him for help. And I have a keen, abiding sense of being part of a huge community. And if I can use oil paint on a canvas to communicate something of goodwill to others, then my job is finished. I mentioned I don't paint for the money. I've been in Lord knows how many art shows, art fairs, open studios and whatnot. So I do accept money. It's not a boogaboo. I will tell you though, at the same time, I've had more than a few instances where someone will look at a piece of my work, and I think back to one young lady who came to an open studio and she saw a portrait that I painted. I used to do portraits as well, and she was so affected by that she started to cry. And I said, "It's yours. Take it." So I think I think each painting has a home it belongs in. And if someone likes my painting, to heck with the money, let's get it where it needs to go. So that's what drives me. And I will say, as I'm getting older, I'm more and more, and this is self-centered as the Dickens, but I'm more and more in wanting to help other people experience the absolute joy of painting. that I've experienced, and I know hundreds of artists, and we're all in the same mindset. We paint it because it's who we are. I had a person ask me one time, "Why do you paint?" And I say, "What do I breathe?" You know, it's what I do, and that's my answer to it. And someone also touched on how unnerving it can be to think about painting. In the teaching I've done, the biggest obstacle I see, bar none, is the doubt that people have. Oh, I couldn't possibly paint, and I'll get them to come to do a lesson, and I try to find out where are they, what do they want to end up with, and I let them know that every artist starts from a different place with a different destination, and they're moving there at a different speed. So it's not a competition. No one's ahead of anybody else. The biggest obstacle, I believe, that the painter has is finding inner peace with themselves, so they have the courage, just the raw courage, to paint.
Finding their path. That's
Pardon?
absolutely true. And of course, that's wonderful life lesson. I mean, if we all did that on a daily basis, we'd probably be just a little happier and a little less warlike.
Yes, absolutely. Amen. Amen. There are a few rules to painting, but I think of them as lifestyle guidelines. One of my things I say is, don't cling to what you know is a mistake just because it took so long to make it. Well, that's true of painting. It's also true of living.
Yes.
And another thing I preach is pay attention to what you're paying attention to. That's a guideline for painting. It's also a life guideline. So,
Well, I guess that is proof of the premise that art saves lives, but it also shapes the life of us. And it's amazing how all of you have done something extraordinary in the community to help others to establish an eye for the art themselves. And maybe they do it, maybe they are appreciators, but that's why you're all together.
I want to encourage people, if they have any questions for these artists, to type them into the Q&A, and we'll take a few minutes. I also want to go down the chat list and make sure we say hello to a few people. So Suzanne from Wimberley, Texas, Jeannie from Velarde, Bill and Jane from Louisa, Virginia, Ash Barron in Wimberley. Hello, Lonnie Shan, Gina and Frank from Overland Park, Kansas. Must be friends of Glory's, right?
I'm recognizing a lot of names. This is beautiful.
Janet Girardi, hello from Golden, Colorado, from Denver, Joanna, and Marcia. So thank you everybody for joining us, and don't hesitate to put in a comment here as we wrap things up. I have put in the websites for each of our guests. And then Sarah, you'll want to put yours in, because I want to pause for a moment here and just highlight Sarah Francis has recently completed a ginormous task and project of an anthology of voices from Taos in northern New Mexico called Unplugged Voices. And indeed, the title reflects the program, but is not connected per se to the program, but certainly has the same tone of relaxed conversational narratives, people sharing their slices of life, their beginnings, their journeys, and sojourns into the Southwest. So want to congratulate Sarah for bringing that project to completion. And all three of our artists tonight do have narratives in that
And I
volume.
didn't realize it until Karen mentioned it, that you were all part of this. For those of our audience who don't know, this book is a coffee table full 4-color illustrated book of 125 short tales from people of all sorts of walks of life. Originally, the project was going to be just a small number of artists and people of letters. And then I started to realize there were stories everywhere in the Four Corners in the Southwest, and they need to be told. Glory introduced me to the Medina family and their lowriders in Española. Major importance. Peter Heller, the author, introduced me to Jim Wagner, who is also the late Jim Wagner, I should say, who was represented in Max and Tony's gallery. And I kept finding people, Jerry de la Cruz and his extraordinary created objects that are little milagros, people whose lifelong desire is to chase and name Mustangs, an artist who makes hats based on the natural rocks out of Utah. And it went on and on until this book came to pass, and it is indeed available on my website, and that's photomirage.com store. And I should say, we are having a giant event in Denver on the 23rd to launch the book and invite people to come. And we plan an event in New Mexico, I'm hoping on the 20th of May, and another one with a little luck at the Millicent Rogers during the summer. So we've got lots of things coming up, and please visit our website for those dates and times. So thank you for letting us say we just love everybody. Oh, by the way, I have to say, the scorpion on the front of the book, the scorpion is chocolate with a gold leaf. And Liliana Padberg, who is the creator of the chocolate, tells me that the scorpion was eaten in whole with great gusto by the recipient, though I am somewhat astonished at that, but that's what she says, so we believe it here.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to take a few minutes to read some of the chat comments and questions. Also, to remind people that this program is recorded, so it will live on the Millicent Rogers YouTube channel. I will send out the link to panelists, and that's also part of why I want to verbalize the chat so future audiences can benefit from that as well. So Joanna Morrow would like to know more about, to know Jim's website. I'm getting a British artist online, something. So just as far as the website, if you go to jimmcdonaldartstudio.com, you should be able to look at Jim's work there and information about Jim. And hi from Suzanne Reynolds of Taos, hello. And then a question from William. Is it helpful to take drawing lessons before starting to paint? Good question. Anybody want to dive into that?
Well, I could, since I really started to paint with Jim, and because my own depth perception, and I used to draw architecture and that kind of thing. I can't do that anymore. My brain just doesn't put the angles together to accurately represent. So just give me a palette knife and some brushes, and I'm not discounting the gift of being able to draw, but it is for my work, other than blocking in maybe with a paintbrush some very large 2-scale directions, if you will, it's not possible for me. So
And then another a comment that this was from Celeste. This was a heartfelt discussion that truly inspired Celeste. So thank you to our panelists. She had the pleasure of taking a workshop recently with Jim and is still applying his skills and teachings to her paintings. So good to hear those
That's nice to hear.
impacts. And I will add just briefly to what you said, Glory, that though I never took drawing lessons before I painted, I drew, and I was playing with color with colored pencils. I loved the colored pencils and layering the colors with colored pencil before I finally decided to play with paint.
Do you
So-
find yourself going to abstracts, Karen, in your paintings?
Yes, my paintings are abstract.
All right, I've got to see them.
Yes. And so to end, let's see, I want to say the museum is now open 7 days a week. We shifted out of our winter slumber and we are open 7 days a week, 10 to 5. Currently, we are hosting the Pastel Society of New Mexico's signature member show through April 16th. And also, for those of you that are interested, just recently on our website, our tickets are now available for the annual, what has become our annual traditional summer fundraiser, our summer party. And this year it's called Turquoise Rocks. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out on our website. And that event is August 5th. So thank you so much to all of you. Max, I'm going to come get myself a t-shirt. And
Yeah, I want
We'll chat
my
some more.
personal caricature, please.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
So
everybody.
much. Bye-bye.
Fabulous speaking.